In this tutorial, we're going to do some more JavaScript practice exercises, again focused around some array methods. So we've got 5 more array method exercises for you in this tutorial, and I'll provide a link to this gist which has actually got some sample data, which is just an array of fake users for you to complete the exercises with. So if you head on over to the gist, you'll see the exercises at the bottom of the array that's given to you. And you can go ahead and either complete all the exercises now and come back if you get stuck, or sit back and watch the video and see some sample solutions to the exercises. And as always, if you have a second before we start, don't forget to subscribe to support the channel and so you don't miss out on any future tutorial updates. Okay, so before we get started with exercise 1, what I'm first going to do is just copy the array onto my clipboard, and then in my developer tools, I'm actually just going to paste that in. And now we've got our users array inside there that we can complete the exercises with. Don't feel like you have to do it this way. If you want to fire up your text editor and complete the exercises there, that's fine also, but don't forget you'll need some way of actually running the JavaScript code. So let's crack on with exercise 1. So exercise 1 is asking us to check whether every email address in the list of users is a valid email. So basically we want to return a true or false value to say yes or no as to whether all the users' emails are valid. And I'll leave it to you to work out what you think a valid email should be. Just as a heads up, all of the emails in the users array should be valid, so we're expecting to get a true response back from whichever function we use. So one possible solution to this would be to use the every function, which if we call it on the users array, will loop through every item in the array and test each item based on a condition that we give it. And the condition just needs to resolve to a true or false, so if we were to say for example every user is true, the every function actually returns a true value for us. But we actually want to check if every user's email address is actually valid. And the email address is available on the user variable that's inside of our callback function. So each user does actually have an email address, so you can see the every function is going to return true for us in this instance, but that's just checking for a truthy value. A non-empty string will always be truthy, but we actually want to check whether or not it's a valid email address. So I'm going to use a very simple regex for this and test the user email address string to see if it matches the pattern supplied in the regular expression. And this isn't probably a very comprehensive regular expression for checking emails, but it's just basically checking that there's an existence of an @ symbol and there's at least actually one literal period in the second component after the @ part of the email address. So with that regex, we can use it to test the user's email string, which as I mentioned at the start of the exercise should return true because each user has got a valid email address. But if we actually go and change one of the user's emails to a string that's not a valid email, you can see there's no @ symbol in the email address now, so if we run the users.every function again, you can see it gives us a false value back because there's one user that doesn't have a valid email address. So one final thing we can do with this function is just to extract the email address from the user object using some destructuring, because we don't actually reference the user object anywhere else inside of our function. So it's up to you whether you want to take that extra step to extract the email property from the user object. It makes sense if that's the only property you need to access and you're not worried about the rest of the user object. So that's one possible solution for exercise 1. Let's have a look at exercise 2. So exercise 2 is asking us to look at the user's IP address and find out how many users we have that have an IP address that's in the class A network. Now don't worry if you don't know what a class A network is. If you follow this link to Wikipedia, in the article, if you scroll down to this table here, you'll see it gives a bit of a description as to what each of the classes mean in networking terms. And all we need to know for our purposes is that a class A network starts at 0000 and in essence finishes when the first number hits 128. So in our exercise, what we're actually looking to do is to find all the users where the first octet in their IP address, that's the first 3 digits before the first period, is in the range of 0 to 128. So when we want to find out the number of items in an array that matches a certain condition, we're best off using the filter function. And this time I'm going to destructure each user object and grab the IP address property. And that IP address property is actually a string, so if we look at an example up here, and we're only interested in these first set of numbers, so I'm going to actually split the string with the delimiter being set as the period. And of course, we're only interested in the first number, so let's just grab the first item in the array that's returned. And all I'm going to do is check that it's less than 128. I guess for completeness, we should check that it's not a negative number, that it's larger than 0. But if we've got IP addresses that have got negative numbers in there, then we've obviously got some bad data, so we won't worry about it too much for this exercise. So you can see by calling the filter function that we get 8 items returned. And if we just check a couple of those, you can see that the IP address for this particular user is 34, so that's within our range. And number 2 is 65, so that's in our range as well. So we can be pretty sure that the filter function has filtered out the users that are only in the class A network. And of course, the exercise actually asked us for the number, so we could actually just access that length property of the array that's returned. And now we can see that there are 8 users that are in that class A network. So that's a potential solution for exercise 2. If a question or a challenge is asking you to find out how many items in an array match a particular condition, then the filter function is the function that you want to use. So let's have a look at exercise 3. So exercise 3 is quite specific. It's asking us to find the position in the array, so that's the index number of the array item, of the first user object that actually has a class B IP address. So back to our Wikipedia article, you can see class B addresses start at 128 and end at 192. So we're essentially looking for an IP address where the first octet matches a value of 128 or larger and is less than 192. So when you want to find out the position in the array of a particular item, we can use the findIndex function. And again, I've destructured each of the user objects to get its IP address because that's the only bit of the data that we're interested in. And this is probably a bit complicated to do all on one line, so I'm actually going to open up the curly braces for this one. And let's do what we did in the previous exercise and grab the first octet of the IP address string. And we'll store that in a variable called firstOctet. So the findIndex function is looking for a true value, and as soon as we return a condition that resolves to true, the index number will be returned. So our condition is going to be using our firstOctet variable to check whether it's in the right range for a class B IP address. And that can just be a simple Boolean expression of checking the variable value is within that range. And the findIndex function actually stops when the first value has been returned, and the value it's given us back is 3. So if we just check our users array, you can see that the user does indeed have a class B IP address. And if you were to check through the rest of the array, you will see that is the first user that does actually have that type of IP address stored as a string. There are actually other users further down in the array that do have a class B address as well, but because this is the first user that is found, the findIndex function stops and returns 3 as the first value that's found. Let's move on and take a look at exercise 4. So exercise 4 is asking us to find the user object, so we want to actually return the whole object in this instance, that has the email address which contains the SoundCloud domain. So notice we're not looking for a specific email address, we just want to find the user object that has SoundCloud within the email address. So because this time we're actually returning the whole object, we can use the find function as opposed to the findIndex function. So destructuring the user object, I'm just going to extract the email property, and from there we want to check the email string to see if it contains the string of SoundCloud. So there are a few different ways you can do this. You can use the indexOf function, or you potentially could use a regular expression as well, but because we're just looking for that specific string and not any other patterns, we can just use the string.includes function. So the find function is really common to use because it's really useful to loop through an array of objects to find an object that has a particular property value, which is essentially what exercise 4 is asking. We're looping through the array of user objects to check whether the email property of the particular user meets a certain condition. Of course, it's quite common if you're trying to find a particular item in an array to check for an exact match. So it's quite common to just check the property against a string or a value using the triple equals operator. So that's one potential solution for exercise 4. I guess you could have also done a filter function for this as well, but the find function's a lot nicer, and it fits this specific purpose of finding an object that has a property with a specific value. So let's have a look at the final exercise, exercise 5. So exercise 5 is a simple one really. It's asking us to replace all of the items in the array with a value of deleted. So this is just going to be a string that literally just says deleted, and we're going to get rid of all the other data that's in that array of objects. So before I show you the solution for this one, if you're not following along and having a go at the exercise yourself, do take a second to just think how you would do this in your head. There's obviously several different array methods that you could use to achieve this. But which one would you pick to actually go through each of the items in the array and set its value just to deleted? So probably the simplest way to do this is to use the fill function, which as you can see goes through each item in the array and just sets its value to whatever you put inside of the parentheses. So other possible solutions would be to maybe use a for each loop, although you'd need to access each item in the array and adjust its value, or you could use the map property, or you could use the map function to return a new array where you set the return value of the map function to just the string of deleted. But the benefit of using the fill function is it does actually destructively change the array. As you can see, the user's array now actually has all of those properties of deleted, whereas with the map function, you'd actually need to reassign the result of the map function back to the variable where the array is stored, which if you've set it up as a constant, you won't be able to do. So it's possibly a strange exercise because I can't think of a good case where you'd want to go through each item in the array and change its value to a set value, but just so you're aware of the fill function and how you could use it if you weren't able to use a map function or a for each function, for example. So there you have it, 5 more exercises going through JavaScript's array methods. Hopefully you've learned a few things about how to use some of the different array methods that are available to you when writing JavaScript code, and maybe you can take away a few things to use in your own projects. Just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to support the channel and so you don't miss out on any future tutorials.